Hello my dear students, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to share you some important questions for your second PUC annual examination. So let us start from the first chapter, Reproduction in Organisms. The questions may be expected like this: define lifespan and write the binomial name of the plant that shows unusual flowering once in 12 years. And offsprings formed from asexual reproduction is referred to as clones. Why? And what are vegetative propagations? And name the vegetative propagules of potato, ginger, agave, bryophyllum, onion, chrysanthemum and water hyacinth. And next is define parthenogenesis. Differentiate between asexual and sexual reproduction. And again one more differentiate between external and internal fertilization, seasonal and continuous breeders. And name the asexual reproductive structures of penicillium, cycon or sponges also they may ask, hydra and chlamydomonas algae. And explain the phases in sexually reproducing organisms. This can be asked for 3 marks. Differentiate between menstrual cycle and estrous cycle and 2 stages in embryogenesis. Differentiate between oviparous and viviparous animals. Let's go for the second chapter, sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Explain the structure of microsporangium or young anther. Again, explain the structure of pollen grain with a neat label diagram. Structure of anatrophous ovule with a neat label diagram. And with a neat label diagram, explain 7-celled 8-nucleated embryo sac. Or else they may also ask like this: explain the structure of mature female gametophyte. Define pollination. Define the following terms: autogamy, getonogamy, xenogamy, and differentiate between chasmogamous and clistogamous flowers. Mention the characteristics of anemophilous flowers, or else they may also ask as wind pollinated flowers directly. And characteristics of entomophilous flowers or insect pollinated flowers. Write a note on artificial hybridization. Draw a neat label diagram of monocotyledonous seed, grass embryo, LS that you have to write. Or else define a seed, mention the types of seed with an example. Define fruit, mention its types with one example each. And define the following terms they may ask. This is all 1 mark: perisperm, apomixis, parthenocarpi, polyembryony. Let's go for the third chapter, human reproduction. Draw a neat label diagram of human male reproductive system and human female reproductive system. And the function of Sertoli cells. What is the function of Leydig cells or interstitial cells also they may ask. Draw a neat label diagram of mammary gland, schematic representation of spermatogenesis, and schematic representation of oogenesis. Sketch and label the TS of ovaries showing various stages of follicular development. Next is explain the ultrastructure of sperm with a neat labeled diagram. And this is 5 marker actually. What is menstrual cycle? Explain the phases in menstrual cycle. What is placenta? Name the hormones secreted by placenta. Functions of placenta. And what is fetal ejection reflex? Name the pituitary hormone which contract uterine wall. And define parturition. Let's go for the fourth chapter, reproductive health. Define reproductive health and what are the significance of reproductive health to our society. What is population explosion? What is contraception? Mention the 2 contraceptive methods. And what are the temporary methods of contraception? Mention their types. And write a note on barrier method they may ask, and or else on oral pills also they may ask. Again write a note on IUDs, that means intrauterine devices. What are the permanent methods of contraception? Explain the types. What are sexually transmitted diseases or venereal diseases? Mention any 6. What are assisted reproductive technology? What are the methods to assist infertile couples to have a child? Let's go for the 5th chapter, very important chapter, Principles of Inheritance and Variation. What is heredity, they may ask in this, genetics, alleles, why Mendel selected pea plants for his experiment, state the law of dominance, explain law of dominance by taking an inheritance of one gene, or else they may also ask like this, law of segregation, purity of gametes or monohybrid cross. Next is explain dihybrid cross or 2-gene inheritance with a suitable example. And this is also known as law of independent assortment. They may also ask like this, explain the law of independent assortment with an example. Next, what is incomplete dominance or partial dominance or blending inheritance? Explain incomplete dominance in Snapdragon. Next, why T.H. Morgan selected Drosophila melanogaster for his experiments? What are mutagens? Name the different kinds of mutagens. Next is, what are Mendelian disorders? Or they may also ask like this, write a note on hemophilia, sickle cell anemia, phenylketonuria or PKU or thalassemia. Next, what are chromosomal disorders? Next, what is Down syndrome? Mention the characters of Down syndrome, or they may also ask about the chromosomal complementarity. Mention the causes and characters of Klinefelter syndrome, as well as mention the causes and characters of Turner syndrome, they may ask. Let's go for the 6th chapter. This is also a very important chapter, molecular basis of inheritance. In this, what are nucleic acids? Explain the double helical structure, duplex model or Watson and Crick model of DNA. Explain the nucleosome model or packaging of DNA helix in eukaryotes. Explain the transforming principle or Griffith transforming principle. Okay, so if they ask transforming principle, you have to write both Griffith's and Avery's experiment. If they ask you just to write the Griffith principle, then you have to write only Griffith principle. Okay, next, describe Hershey-Chase experiment. It is also known as Blender's experiment that proves DNA as a genetic material. DNA is considered to be better genetic material. How do you justify this statement? That is DNA versus RNA. What is DNA replication? Describe the semi-conservative mode of DNA replications. Next, describe Michelson and Stahl experiment, which provides an experimental proof for semi-conservative mode of replication. Next question, what is genetic code? Mention the salient features of genetic code. Define transcription. Describe the process of transcription in prokaryotes. Describe the process of transcription in prokaryotes also they may ask, or else eukaryotes, will make it eukaryotes. Explain the post-transcriptional modification. What is translation? Explain the process of translation. Explain lac operon for switching on and switching off of genes during lactose metabolism. Or they may also ask directly regulation of gene expression. Next, mention the salient features of Human Genome Project. What is DNA fingerprinting? Explain the steps involved in DNA fingerprinting. Next, mention the applications of DNA fingerprinting also they may ask. Let's go for the 7th chapter, evolution. In this, draw a neat label diagram to represent Miller's experiment. Differentiate between homologous and analogous organs, or else they may also ask indirectly like this: divergent and convergent evolution. Next, describe industrial mechanism with respect to natural selection. Next is, what is adaptive radiation? Explain adaptive radiation in Darwin finches. State and explain Hardy-Weinberg law. Name the factors affecting Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. Or they may also ask the same question like this: name the agents of evolutionary changes. Next, give an account of human evolution mentioning various stages, time period, food habit and brain capacity. Let's go for the 8th chapter, Human Health and Diseases. It is a very big chapter. In this, you may expect some questions like this: define health, mention the causative agents and symptoms and diagnosis of typhoid, mention the pathogen, mode of transmission and symptoms of pneumonia, again pathogen, mode of transmission and symptoms of common cold. Next, causative organism, mode of transmission and symptoms of malaria, causative organism, mode of transmission and symptoms of amoebiasis or amoebic dysentery. Again pathogen, mode of transmission and symptoms of ascariasis. Pathogen, mode of transmission, symptoms of elephantiasis or filariasis. Pathogen, mode of transmission and symptoms of ringworm disease. Next, briefly explain the life cycle of malarial parasite with the diagram you have to write. Next, suggest some measures to control infectious disease. Name the measures to be taken to control vector-borne disease. What is immunity? Mention its two types. Write the difference between innate immunity, acquired immunity. With a neat label diagram, explain the structure of an antibody molecule. Differentiate between antigen, antibody, B lymphocyte, T lymphocyte, active immunity, passive immunity. And define the terms vaccine, vaccination and immunization. What is allergy? List out the possible methods of transmission of AIDS, mechanism of transmission of AIDS. Name the widely used diagnostic tools for AIDS. What is cancer? What are tumors? And mention its types. Then differentiate between benign tumor and malignant tumor. Characteristics of cancerous cells. What are carcinogens? Explain the types of carcinogens, or else they may also ask like this: causes of cancer. What are the techniques available to detect and diagnosis of cancer? List out some of the treatment which are available for curing cancer. Next, what is drug? What are opioids? Give an example. What are cannabinoids? Give an example. What are coca-alkaloid or cocaine? Give an example. List the causes of drug abuse in adolescence. Next, using tobacco in any form is injurious to health. Give reason. What is withdrawal symptom? Mention the withdrawal symptoms of drug addicts. List the effects of drug or alcohol abuse. Next, mention the measures practiced to prevent drug and alcohol abuse or drug and alcohol by adolescents. Let's go for the 9th chapter, strategies for the enhancement in food production. In this, what is animal husbandry? What is dairy farm management? What are the measures undertaken to improve the quality and quantity of milk production? Next, what is breed? Name an improved breed of cow. What is inbreeding? Write any 2 advantages of inbreeding. Next, what is inbreeding depression? How to overcome it? Next, differentiate between outcrossing and crossbreeding. And what is interspecific hybridization. Next, name a breed of sheep developed in Punjab by crossing Bicanary Aves and Merino rams. Name any two controlled breeding experiments in animals to improve the quality of progeny. Next, explain the steps involved in moat or the technique to increase herd size. What is poultry? Name any 4 poultry birds which are used for food and eggs. Write any 4 proper poultry farm management. Write 2 advantages of artificial insemination. What is apiculture? Mention the important points for successful beekeeping. Define fishery. Mention any 2 freshwater fishes and marine fishes. What is blue revolution? What is plant breeding? Write the 4 triads for which plant breeding is done. Explain the 5 steps involved in plant breeding techniques. Name 2 high-yielding wheat varieties introduced in India, that is in 1963. Which are the 2 rice varieties used to develop semi-dwarf rice variety in 1966 in India? Name 2 semi-dwarf rice variety developed in India during 1966 also they may ask. Okay, the same question. Next, name the improved characteristics of wheat that helped India to achieve green revolution. Name any 5 hybrid varieties of crop plants developed in India. Next, give one example of disease caused by fungi, bacteria and viruses in crop plants. Define biofortification. Mention any 4 improving objectives of this biofortification. Next, define SCP or single-celled proteins. Name a microorganism that can produce large amount of single-cell protein. What is plant tissue culture? Define the term totipotency. What is explant? What is micropropagation? Give the meaning of the term somaclones. What is somatic hybridization? Name the chemical used to fuse 2 protoplasts. Mention the applications of plant tissue culture. Next, microbes in human welfare. Describe any 5 useful household products in which microbes are involved. Next, write the scientific name of a microbe from which the following product is obtained. Write one function of each of the products. So, first one is statins, penicillin, next acetic acid, streptokinase, cyclosporine A, citric acid. Or they may also ask like this. Describe the role of microbes in industrial products. Name the enzymes used to make bottled fruit juices clearer. Or 3 enzymes of industrial importance. What is sewage? Define BOD or biochemical oxygen demand. Describe the process of treatment of sewage water. What is biogas? Describe the structure of biogas plant with a neat label diagram. What is biocontrol? Describe any 5 biological control of pest and disease. Explain the role of any 5 microbes which enriches the soil nutrients. Or they may also ask the same question like this. Describe the role of microbes as biofertilizers. Let's go for biotechnology, principles and processes. In this, define biotechnology. Name the tools of recombinant DNA technology. Differentiate between exonuclease and endonuclease. Name the enzyme which is also called molecular scissors. Name the enzyme used in linking the DNA segments together. Name the 3 basic steps involved in genetically modifying an organism. How are restriction enzymes named? Explain the action of restriction endonuclease. The same thing, it is repeated. Just leave it. List the features of vector required to facilitate cloning. Draw a neat label diagram of PBR 322 plasmid. What is competent host? Explain the methods of making bacteria capable to take up recombinant DNA. Give a brief account of vectors used for cloning genes in plants and animals. Next, mention the steps involved in rDNA technology. Give the diagrammatic representation of recombinant DNA technology. Next, explain the process of gel electrophoresis, or explain the process of separation and isolation of DNA. Both are same. Next, explain the various steps involved in PCR. What is bioreactor? Explain the simple stirred tank bioreactor with a neat label diagram, and write a note on downstream processing. Let's go for the biotechnology and its applications chapter. In this, what is green revolution? What are genetically modified organisms? Give examples. What are the advantages of genetically modified organism? Write a note on Bt cotton. What are crygenes? Mention the types and specific insects they kill. What is RNA interference or RNAi technology? How does this helps in protecting the host from nematodal infestation? Name the hormone produced by genetic engineering. Next, explain briefly the process of synthesis of human insulin. Write a short notes on gene therapy. Write a note on SCID. What are transgenic animals? What are the applications of transgenic animals? Or they may also ask the same question like this. What are the reasons for creating transgenic animals? Write a short notes on ethical issues and what is biopiracy. Next, let's move towards the organisms and populations chapter. Define the term ecology. Mention the abiotic factors of the environment. Write a note on temperature as a abiotic factor. Write a note on water as a abiotic factor. Write a note on the importance of light as abiotic factor for plants. Write a note on soil as abiotic factor. What are the 4 ways through which the living organisms respond to abiotic factors? Next, what is homeostasis? Explain the mechanism by which humans regulate their body temperature. Next, write a note on conformers. The smaller animals are rarely found in polar regions. Give reason. Write a note on migration. What is dormancy, hibernation, estivation, diapause, adaptation? Then how is kangaroo rat adapted for lack of external source of water? List the adaptation seen in animals for cold climate. Next, desert lizards are conformer. Hence, they cope up with the stressful environment by behavioral adaptation. How? Next, what is population? How the body of humans get adapted for high altitudes, or how the body solves the problem of altitude sickness. Mention the 4 factors that affects population growth. Define natality, mortality, emigration and emigration. Graphically represent the exponential growth curve with the equation. Next, graphically represent the logistic growth curve with the equation. What is predation? Explain the characteristics of predation. Give 2 examples for defensive adaptation developed by the prey against predators. Next, what is parasitism? Describe the adaptation of the parasites which enables them to survive in the host. Write a note on brood parasitism observed in birds. Define competition, mention its types. What is commensalism? Give examples. What is amensalism? What is mutualism? With an example, briefly describe mutualism. Write a note on sexual descent. Next, let's move towards the ecosystem chapter. In this, define ecosystem, define the term productivity, define primary productivity, gross primary productivity, net primary productivity, what is secondary productivity, decomposition, what is detritus, then describe the steps involved in decomposition, this is 5 mark, and explain the factors affecting the process of decomposition. Next, what is food chain? Explain the types of food chain. What is food web? What is 10% law? What are ecological pyramids? Give reason. Pyramid of energy is always upright and can never be inverted. Construct an ideal pyramid of numbers in a grassland ecosystem. Next, ideal pyramid of biomass. Inverted pyramid of biomass. Next, pyramid of energy when they may also ask like this. Okay. When 10 lakh joules of sunlight is available. What are the limitations of ecological pyramids? Next, what is meant by ecological succession? Differentiate between primary and secondary succession. Explain xeric or hydric succession. How does phosphorus cycle differs from carbon cycle? Name any 4 ecosystem services. Schematically represent simplified model of carbon cycle or phosphorus cycle, they may ask. Let's go for the 15th chapter, biodiversity and conservation. In this, define biodiversity. Name the types of biodiversity or name the different levels of biodiversity, they may ask. Why tropical rainforest has greater biodiversity? Graphically represent the species area relationship curve with equation. Briefly explain the evil quadrant of biodiversity loss. What are the reasons for conservation of biodiversity? What are sacred groves and sacred species? Give an example each. What is red data book? What are biodiversity hotspots? Name the biodiversity hotspots in India. What are threatened species? What are vulnerable species? What are rare species? What are endangered species? Endemic species. Explain IUCN. What are sacred species? Explain the 2 methods of conservation of biodiversity. Next, let us move towards the last chapter, environmental issues. In this, define pollution, define air pollution, mention its pollutants, list out the effects of air pollution, describe the mechanism of working of electrostatic precipitator, mention the advantages and problem of the use of CNG, define noise pollution, list out the harmful effects of noise pollution. What is biomagnification? Define eutrophication. What is solid waste? Next, write a note on e-waste. What is radioactive waste? Mention their effects and control measures. What is ecosan? What is greenhouse effect? What is global warming? This question is repeated. Discuss the causes and effects of global warming. What measures to be taken to control global warming? Define soil erosion. Mention any 2 causes for soil erosion. What is desertification? Next, water logging and soil salinity are some of the problems to affect the growth of the crops. Justify. Next, define reforestation. Name any one people's participation in the conservation of forest. Or they may also ask about the joint forest management. So, these are some of the important questions for your examination. See students, if you prepare well for whatever I had discussed till now, I am damn sure you can score above 60 in your examination. Hope this helped you. Thank you.